This is an introduction to supply and demand functions. For demand functions, they give the relationship of the demand of a product in relation to the price of the product. And typically you'll see, it's just a rough sketch here. You'll see price where the y-axis would be, and you'll see demand where the x-axis would be, and there's some sort of curve. It could be a line. Usually it'll be some sort of curve that kind of runs like this. Here showing that when the demand is low, there's typically a higher price. When the demand is high, there's typically a lower price. For supply functions, these give the relationship between the amount of product a supplier is willing to produce in relation to the price of the product. So again, I'll draw a little sketch here. Which has an x and y axis. The y axis again is typically the price. The x axis would be the quantity, the supply. And when you're looking at this, typically you'll see a curve that looks something like this. So, they want to supply a lower amount when the price is lower, and when the price of the item is higher, then they would want to increase their supply so they can make more money. For demand, right, the demand for a product is going up, right, as the price is lower. So, this is just an introduction. Later in the course we'll do a little bit more with this, but one of the things that we look for is what they call the equilibrium point. And the equilibrium point occurs at the price when the supply is equal to the demand. All right, so the equilibrium point occurs at the price when the supply is equal to the demand. So let's take a look at an example here. So for this example, we have the equations below. give the demand. And supply functions for coffee makers. Q represents the quantity in millions of coffee makers. And P is the price. In dollars. So you have an S, and the demand curve has the function P equals 200 minus 4Q, and the supply curve has the function P equals Q plus 25. And the question is actually going to ask us to find the equilibrium point. Right, so we really want to find the equilibrium point here. Now, basically, based on the definition we just talked about, we said the equilibrium point was, where the supply is equal to the demand, right? It's the price where the supply is equal to the demand. So if we have the demand curve and we have the supply curve, what we really do is we set them equal. In other words, this is a system of equations. We have two equations with two unknowns. They both say P equals. So if P equals this and P equals this, the price is equal to this and the price is equal to this, we want to know when the price is equal to the price. So we're really going to set, right, the 200 minus 4Q equal to the Q plus 25. And then we want to solve this. So to solve this, we want to get our Q's to one side, everything that's constant to the opposite side. I'll add 4Q to each side here. So I have 200 equals Q plus 4Q is 5Q plus 25. And then we'll subtract 25 from each side. So I end up with 200 minus 25 is 175 equals 5Q. And then we'll divide both sides here by 5. So we end up with Q equals, doing 175 divided by 5, Q equals 35. Now let's make sure we look at the units on that. So Q, remember, is what? It says Q was the quantity, right, in millions of coffee makers. So this is 35 million coffee makers. That's the quantity. Now the equilibrium point, actually is a ordered pair, right? Q is like your X value and P, the price, is like your Y value. So we want to find the corresponding Y value. You actually can back substitute this quantity Q into either of the original equations to figure out what that price is. It should be the same because it's the equilibrium point. So no matter which one you sub it into, you should get the same value out. So I'm going to back sub, and to back substitute this, I'm going to use the P equals Q plus 25 just because it's a little easier to substitute into. So we would have P is equal to the quantity, which we just found was 35 million, which is 35 plus 25. So P is equal to 35 plus 25, which gives us 60. Now what's P? P was, if you remember from the top, it says P is the price in dollars. So the price for the coffee maker is $60. When the price is $60, the amount of coffee makers sold is 35 million coffee makers. So the equilibrium point, in this case Q comma P, would be the point 35 comma 60. But it's important to know what these mean. 35, right, that's the Q, the millions of coffee makers, and 60 is that they sell for $60. So when these coffee makers are selling for $60, 35 million of them is our quantity. So that was just an introduction to the supply and demand functions and how to find equilibrium point. Later in the course, we'll be using this with calculus to find some other things about the supply and demand curves.